Okay.
Uh, Welcome, everyone, to, I believe it's the fourth in a series of webinars put on by Point View Wealth Management. We're going to talk just a little bit about how the structure of this afternoon is going to work as other people join in on the webinar. Obviously, our topic here today is saving for college. It will be presented primarily by Claire Toth. More about her background and qualifications in a moment. I'm kind of serving here as the host. My name is David Dietz. I am the founder and president of Point View Wealth Management. That's more than 26 years ago. Before we get into a little bit about who we are and why we're doing what we're doing, let's just go talk a little bit about some of the abilities you'll have in this webinar cast. A couple things. One is you can ask questions. Now, how does that work? No one's going to hear your question. You're going to actually type it in on your computer. It's going to be forwarded to us. No one else will see your question, and we look forward to answering them and giving you some information at the end of the webinar. So be patient, please. We're also going to have a poll. What's the poll do? The poll has kind of a provocative question. The poll question is, do you feel it's your responsibility to pay for your kids or perhaps your grandkids' college tuition? There's no absolute right or wrong answer, but you're going to have an opportunity right there on the side of your computer screen to say, yes, you agree with that, or no, you don't. And we're going to give you the results of that poll near the end. Well, I think we're going to get started here. And to get started, let's put our presentation today in context. We are Point View Wealth Management. Who are we? Well, we're sitting here in Summit, New Jersey. That's where we're based. But more importantly, we are investment advisors. We are registered with the Securities Exchange Commission. And why is that important? That forces us, in addition to by temperament, but by law, to adhere to the highest fiduciary standards on behalf of our clients. We always must put our clients first, period. We are independent. We are not part of some big Wall Street shop, which has other clients and other divisions, maybe working with issuers of securities or having other agendas. We just work for a select group of clients. It's about 150 to 175. With about $335 million under management, and we are independent, so there's no house products, there's no secret agenda that we are pushing. In that connection, we are fee only, not fee-based. What's that mean? It means everyone in the investment business, the financial planning business, is compensated. The question is, how free from harmful influence is that compensation, and how transparent is it? Ours is a flat 1% on the amounts under management. What we avoid is front-end fees, back-end fees, kickbacks, or anything coming from mutual funds or anything like that. What you see is what you pay. But of course, we are investment managers. We're proud of that, but that's not all we do. We are holistic financial planners. We're basically, we want to be basically family CFOs. We want to be the first call for any financial issue for one of our clients. So that could involve something to do with their portfolio, but could involve anything from, financing a car, a mortgage, making charitable donations, and if we're going to talk about with the deep dive today, funding a college education. One way that we really part company from a lot of the so-called competition is we don't believe in taking a client's money and then outsourcing the management of it to a third party. That's called investing in mutual funds. That's called investing in ETFs, exchange trade funds. No, what we do for many reasons, including tax efficiency, to keep fees down, to keep transparency as high as possible, to get some focus, but not over diversification, we're using individual stocks and bonds, and that provides our clients a lot of advantage. We work with clients that have $500,000 under our management and up. As I mentioned, it's 1%, not just for the portfolio investment management, but also for the financial planning. There are no extras at Point View. And as I mentioned, clients save by not having to pay third-party mutual fund fees. We do have an option where people can just have a deep dive financial plan developed for them from both an investment point of view and a financial point of view, and they pay one flat fee. Most clients who do that then elect to go forward and have some or all of their assets management. And the nice thing is all of that fee is credited dollar for dollar against future ongoing management fees. One thing that's so important in this business is security of your assets. We're proud to say that although we have no relationship with in terms of being an employee, all of our assets of our clients are custody at Fidelity Investments, one of the top investment managers and custodians in the world, with as much security and insurance as any competition out there. Let us flip slides here. We have been in business for over 26 years, and during that time, we are very proud and indeed actually humbled to be recognized on the national scale. CNBC has ranked us as one of the top independent fee-only registered investment advisors in the USA. And just this year, or 2018 actually, Financial Advisor magazine recognized us as one of the top investment advisors in the country. Of course, Claire and I don't do this alone. We are so lucky to have a great, outstanding team. We've got 3 other portfolio managers. We've got 3 client service representatives. And last but hardly least, Marcela Garcia is our lady about town, all things technology, marketing, social media, all that. We are so lucky to have all of these people, and you see the collection right there in front of you there. Now, I want to really introduce who's going to be our primary speaker, sharing her years and years of wisdom, and that's Claire Toth. And of course, she's Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at Point View, and works with clients across the spectrum, from CEOs to people who work for technology companies, to retirees, to families with children and so forth. Before she came to Point View, she's been here now for close to 2 decades, but she has worked in private practice at the law firm of Harold and Haynes. And of course, for 11 years, she was in the Department of Treasury right there in Washington, D.C., helping the IRS on very specialized matters and so forth. Indeed, she actually still maintains a law license with the local summit firm of Bourne, Knowles & Kenyon. She's written widely. She's spoken widely. She's proud to hold degrees, both undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Chicago, Phi Beta Kappa, a Master of Laws and Taxation from Georgetown, and certified financial planner. And when she's not doing her day job, she does her evening jobs, doing all things to help the local community in which we're so lucky to live in. So with that, I'm going to turn the slides over to Claire.
Okay, thank you, David. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Have we got this the right way? Here are the slides that matter. Thinking about paying for college can be really scary. Costs have tripled in the past 30 plus years. I think for a lot of us, the 2 biggest costs over the course of our lifetime are getting the kids through college, or maybe ourselves through college, and then worrying about long-term care after retirement. So we're going to talk about the college piece of it first. A couple of things from this slide worth noting. It's not necessarily apparent. The cost of public institutions, although less than the cost of private schools, has been increasing at a more rapid pace. That's because the state budgets are squeezed. There's less public money available for those public colleges, and they're having to raise tuitions pretty quickly, particularly on out-of-state students. There's been a push to hold down the cost of increases in tuition, particularly in private schools, for the past couple of years. That doesn't make it cheap. Right now, the sticker price for 4 years of a private school, all in, room, board, books, transport, yada, yada, is about $250,000, which most of us don't have lying around. Somebody says, when should you start? Well, any college savings account that is associated with your child's name on it The child does need to have been born because you need a social security number for the kid. But other than that, there's no such thing as too soon. In the past couple of decades, the 529 plan has become the savings vehicle of choice for college. There's a bunch of reasons for that. Essentially, when you put the money in, you don't get a deduction for the money you contribute, at least not on your federal return. We'll put an asterisk there for a few of the states. However, the money grows tax-free so long as it is paid out for a qualified educational expense, then it comes out tax-free, so that the growth in the money you contribute never gets taxed. And this is a great deal. It's very much like a Roth IRA for college, if you're familiar with the Roth IRA. Mechanically, the way they're set up under federal tax law, each state sponsors its own 529 plan. States tend not to be in the business of managing these things, though a few used to try. So they're typically farmed out to a different brokerage firm or investment manager. So you'll see that Fidelity has a few of them. Upromise works with some, that Vanguard runs some, different brokerage firms do. You're not required to stick with your own state. It makes sense to shop around for a really good, cheap plan. A few states, primary among them New York, for folks in the tri-state area, New York will give you a state tax deduction of some amount for contributions to its 529 plan. And this can apply even if you don't live in New York, but you work there, so you're paying some tax to New York. New York also has a really good, inexpensive 529 plan, so a lot of people tend to use that one. But there's a bunch of good ones. There's a bunch of not so good ones. Actually, New Jersey has a not so good one. It's hard to recommend even to New Jersey residents that they go with the New Jersey 529. So you pick a state. There's more than 50 choices because some states have more than one choice. You can contribute almost as much or as little as you would like. There's typically a maximum amount you can contribute to a 520. You or anybody else can contribute to a single 529 plan on behalf of a student, which is another point. One person sets up the 529 plan, typically mom or dad, but anyone can contribute to it. So if you've got grandparents who want to make 529 contributions or otherwise help for college, they don't have to set up their own plan. It's much more simple to have one 529 plan that's the hub for all of it. Folks tend to think of $15,000 as the most they can contribute each year. That has a lot to do with when you file a gift tax return. It has nothing to do with when you might owe a tax liability. But it's an easy number, and if you're able to put $15,000 away per parent, that's great. You can certainly contribute more. There will not be any tax detriment to putting in more than $15,000 per person per year. You would have to file a gift tax return, which is no big deal. Within the 529, you're given a menu of investment choices, much as you've got a menu of investment choices in your 401k plan. And there are some equity, some stock funds, there are some fixed income funds, there are some life age-based funds, much as in your 401k plan. You might have a target date fund for retirement. 529 plans have the same. We don't necessarily recommend going with an age-based fund. It's easy, but it also assumes that those are the only resources available to pay for your child's college tuition or your college expenses. That may or may not be the case. For most folks, don't expect to put enough money into a 529 plan to pay for 100% of college. They expect that they'll be using some of their other assets as well. They may be looking at loans as well. And if that's the case, it makes sense that how the 529 is invested meshes with your overall portfolio and with some of the other accounts that you're using to save for retirement, to save for just general life. So that's worth taking a good close look at. In addition to paying for college, the 2017 tax bill now allows you to use the 529 plan for up to $10,000 of private school tuition. And that's tuition only. You can pay for a lot more than tuition at the college level, but not at the pre-college level. On occasion, we've seen clients who have almost overfunded their children's 529 plans while the kids are still in high school. And if the kids are in private school, why not use it for the private school? But that's not really what the 529 plan is for. 529 plans also cannot pay for everything involved with college. It's easiest to think of them as you can use it to pay for the stuff the college sends you a bill for. Tuition, room and board. You can use it to pay for books. You can't use it to pay for transportation to and from the school. You can't use it to pay for pocket money, for the student activity fees, for fraternity and sorority dues, that kind of thing. So although it can pay for a lot, it's not going to pay for everything. And of course, a 529 isn't the only way to save for college. It's in many situations, it's the best way. It isn't the only way. Something that's been around about as long as a 529 plan is called the Coverdell Education Savings Account. Back in the day when 529 plans weren't as flexible as they are now, the Coverdell plan gave you a lot more flexibility. In certain aspects, it's got a lot of restrictions as well. You can only put $2,000 a year into a Coverdell plan, so it's not going to pay for a lot of college. There are income limits on the contributor. The parent cannot contribute unless the household income is about $190,000 or less. It's the same income limits as making Roth contributions. On the plus side, a Coverdell can invest in anything. It's not limited to that menu of state-sponsored funds. But for $2,000 a year that you're putting into it, you're really unlikely to build a really big stock portfolio. So most folks aren't using Coverdells anymore. For a long time, people would use a uniform transfers to minor or a uniform gifts to minor account. That would be the UGMA or the UTMA to save for college. Excuse me. That's a really easy account to open. You just walk into the bank or the brokerage firm, sign the form, pow, you've got it. And it became popular because it was so easy. You didn't necessarily have to go through some of the rigmarole, as much paperwork as there is with a 529. The UTMA accounts can be a real problem. When the kid becomes an adult, the kid owns the money. So if you save a few $100,000 in that plan, depending on the state you live in, when your child turns 18 or 21, that money belongs to your child. I don't know about you, but most of us weren't making the smartest financial decisions for ourselves at that age. So I caution folks, if you want to give the kid some money so the kid gets used to managing money, that's great. But don't put anything into an UTMA or an UGMA that you aren't willing to say goodbye to. Finally, you should be wary about too much debt, college debt, both for you and for your child. You're probably seeing articles that are all over the place about the amount of debt kids are graduating from college carrying with them and how that's impacting them, projected for decades to come. There are plenty of good colleges and good ways to pay for college without saddling your child with six-figure debt loads. And if we're going to go back to 529s for a moment, because that does seem to be the focus of how folks are paying for college, there are some myths, there are some common questions. If your child doesn't go to college, what happens to the money? Or the one I love, what if my kid gets a full ride? Your kid is unlikely to get a full ride. Sorry to break it to you. You've got some options. One is you can change the beneficiary on a 529 plan. Kid A may not need all the money, but kid B might. Certainly, 529 isn't just for college, it's also for grad school, and many of our children are going to go on to grad school. So if there's some money left over, that can really help out there. If you want to go back to school and get another degree, you can use what's left in the 529 plan. Worst case scenario, there's money left over in the 529 plan, and there's no one to spend it on. Well, you can take it back out of the 529. You're going to pay tax on a pro rata share of the appreciation that occurred in the account since you contributed. And there is tracking year by year on how much is the money you contributed to the 529 and how much growth is in there. So you'd have to pay tax on the growth. You'd also have to pay a 10% penalty on the growth. It's not the end of the world. And in the meantime, you have gotten that growth tax-free. If the kid goes to school outside of the United States, can you use 529? A lot of overseas schools are becoming popular, particularly the United Kingdom and Canada. Some of those costs are lower. And the answer is yes. If it's a school where you're eligible to apply for U.S. financial aid, then you can use a 529 to help pay for those school expenses. If you go to the Department of Education website, there is a way to search these. Right now, it's a downloadable Excel spreadsheet that gets updated about once a month. It's fairly clunky, but there are ways to sort it. So you can say sort by country and look for all the schools in Ireland where your child could go to college and still use a 529 plan. Again, if you take money out of the 529 and you don't use it for the college purposes, are you penalized? You're going to pay taxes on the growth and a 10% penalty on the growth. So there's going to be some tax, but not on everything. Can you use the 529 for other than undergraduate? Yes, you can use it for graduate. It's not a problem. Will a robust 529 impact financial aid? No. Do not hesitate to fund a 529 because you think you're going to get a better deal with student loans or financial aid. You won't. The 529 has a marginal effect on the college aid process, with one exception. If the 529 is established in your child's name, it can have negative impact on financial aid. It's why the parent should be establishing the 529, not the student. What about scholarships? I haven't seen that. It's possible. It depends on what the schools ask in the process. They're certainly entitled to ask about it. They may or may not. I haven't seen that happen regularly. It's not to say it might not. But again, don't let the possibility of free money dissuade you from the practical aspect of saving for your kids' education. And finally, can you use the 529 before college? Yes, you can use up to $10,000 a year for private school tuition. Every time you sit down in an airplane, when they do the safety check, the oxygen masks drop and they say, put on your own mask before you help before you help those around you. The same goes for paying for college. Help yourself for your own retirement before you save heavily for your kids' college education. There are other ways besides 529 and parents' resources to pay for college. Scholarships, federal loans, that sort of thing don't exist to pay for retirement. And most of us, if we asked our kids, would you like a free ride through college in exchange for supporting me the last 20 years of my life, the kid would probably say, no, I'll find another way to go to college. And last, just because I've done this before and I've seen a lot of my clients go through it, a couple of tips if you are looking for college money. Yeah, finding the right college, you're hearing that from your kid's guidance counselor already. There are a number of schools out there. They pay a lot of attention to these college rankings, and schools that have fairly significant endowments on a per student basis are often willing to essentially buy their way up the college rankings. That means that schools with a lot of money will offer generous merit scholarships, whether or not your child merits it, to a student who they think is going to be in the upper third or upper quarter of the incoming class. Those tend to be schools that aren't necessarily the top 10 or 12 schools everyone in your kid's high school is looking to apply to, but they can be really good schools. There's another group of schools, tends to be fairly quiet, who basically won the Lucky Alumni Contest. I'm aware of a number of small liberal arts schools you've never heard of who have an alum who co-founded a big tech company and gave generously back to the college. Those schools have money. There isn't a centralized way to find them. A lot of it is word of mouth, but do some digging. When you go on those college visits, look around. Every school finds it easy to spend money on the athletic facilities and the dormitories. That's what people see. It's what alumni like to give money for. Schools that are investing in the less sexy stuff, particularly if they're investing, say, in their library or their non-hard science academic buildings, those are schools with real money. And if they're going to spend it on the social studies department, they're probably willing to spend it on your kid as well. Ask questions. The retention rate, the 4-year graduation rate, and be sure it's the 4 or the 5-year graduation rate. A lot of state schools in particularly give you a 6-year graduation rate. So be sure you know when your kid's going to graduate. I see a lot of folks who they've got 4 years worth of college paid for, but their kid takes 5 or 6, and that can really be a backbreaker. Find out what kind of alumni network they've got. If it's a good one and kids are getting internships with the alums, you're going to hear about that. And at the end of the day, there are a lot of really great schools out there, and your kid is going to get into one of them. I promise you. And you're going to find a way to pay for it without killing yourself. And to that end, let's take some questions. I'm going to throw this back to David. Let him find some questions. And then we'll talk about the quiz or the
absolutely, Claire. Thank you so much for that great overview of saving for college. And remember, everyone out there, this is a lady who not only is a practitioner, but is a mom with a freshman at American University in Washington, D.C., and a junior out in Colorado. So she knows from all different angles exactly what she speaks of. So we're going to take some questions here, but I just want to remind folks that we've got the poll ongoing here, and we're going to give you a few more minutes to cast your votes. Remember, the question here is, do you feel it's your responsibility to pay for your kid or grandkids' college tuition? So cast your ballot. We'll give you the results before we finish up here. So now, of course, thank you so much for submitting some great questions. We're going to select a few to go forward and give you some answers on, and I'm going to give the mic back to Claire here.
Oh, that's because he can't find the questions either.
Let me see here.
Here we are. Okay. The first one is, if my child is entering college next year, should I allocate the 529 portfolio to be more conservative? Okay, if your child is starting college next year, that means you're going to be paying tuition for another 4 or 5 years. So not all of that portfolio needs to be conservative. I've got no problem with a couple of semesters worth being in fixed income and protected from any investment fluctuation. But beyond that, I think most folks still ought to be willing to take some moderate amount of market risk. It also matters what you've got outside of your 529 plan. If you've got significant assets outside of it, you can certainly be more aggressive than otherwise.
Yeah, and I'm going to just give you a little bit more data on that. We normally, of course, like to see people have a very balanced asset allocation. That would mean some faster growing assets like stocks, some more stable assets like bonds, and of course, cash. Because the 529s grow tax-free, and if used for a qualified educational expense come out tax-free, all things being equal, we'd rather have the faster growing assets in there to take maximum advantage of the ability to take out all those hefty profits tax-free. So, again, as Claire pointed out, if what is in the 529 is just a small part of the overall family's nest egg, it could be viewed more as a tax strategy rather than the sole way to meet college expenses, and therefore you could be more aggressive with that and take advantage of those tax attributes. Thank you.
Okay. One question is, what if you also have a Coverdell account? That's the smaller analog to the 529. Well, congratulations for having more than one choice. At the college level, the Coverdell and the 529 can both pay for pretty much the same things and are prohibited from paying for pretty much the same things. If your child is still in K through 12, particularly in a private school, the Coverdell can pay for more expenses than the 529 plan can. The 529 is limited to tuition. If it's a boarding school, the Coverdell can help pay for room and board, that sort of thing, books. Otherwise, they are pretty much equivalent in what they can pay for. It's up to you which one you want to tap first. As I said before, the Coverdell has more investment options, but it's typically a much smaller account. So you get to balance whether you like the investment options or you just want to pay down the smaller accounts first, so you've got fewer accounts to deal with at the end of the day. Okay, so if you've got a 529 plan and some other assets, which one do you use first? The answer is almost the same as with the Coverdell. In a lot of ways, it's up to you. If you are looking to borrow money to finish up college, you probably want to pay down your non-529 assets first, because then your balance sheet it actually looks a little thinner than it does with the 529. Doesn't have as big an impact on, as I said, on the financial aid process as non-529 assets do. So if you are planning to spend down X account someplace else, spending it down first can help when it comes to financial aid. That would be the one big one there. Somebody else asked if there are multiple UTMA accounts, is there a way to balance them? I'm not sure if we're talking about multiple UTMA accounts for the same child, and if the same parent opened up different UTMA accounts for the same child, you can certainly combine them. Or if mom opened one, dad opened one, you can combine them. If the parents opened one and the grandparents opened another, you really can't combine them. But I believe in simplifying and consolidating, so I would pay down the smaller accounts first, just to clean up your spreadsheets. How many more do we have? Ask me another one, David.
Well, I think one question that people have all the time is, if I take the money out from the 529 for K through 12 education expenses, you said that there will be not included in your federal income. That's pulling out tax-free. Is it always included? Is it always exempt from state income tax, or there are some states perhaps that actually don't give you the pass on taxable income when the money is pulled out for a K through 12 educational expense?
Well, you've got 50 potential answers to that question, and I can't say definitively yay or nay. I can say that most states' income tax structure starts with what is income for federal purposes and then tweaks from there. So the ability to use a 529 for pre-college expenses started in 2018. I have not yet heard of a state that has changed its tax law to get a different result. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. So I would double check on that. And I would also caution people from spending 529 funds before college without a good reason. The real benefit of a 529 plan is years of untaxed appreciation. So if you put money in the 529 in year one and take it out in year 2 or 3 to pay for private school tuition, you haven't gotten a whole lot of growth. That you really haven't used the 529 plan to its best potential. And you've also got potentially not enough in the plan to pay for college when college comes. And that's the real purpose of it. When I've seen people use the 529 pre-college, I have seen it in a situation where they've already got well over that $250,000 in the account, and they're hedging their bets that their kid might not go to grad school right away.
Hey, Claire, I see a question coming up by a number of viewers here. And of course, you know, these 529s are the greatest thing since sliced bread, but of course, in today's political arena, there's all sorts of proposals for changes in the tax law, tweaking this, changing that. What's your view as to any potential changes in the 529 tax laws, and how would you hedge that?
That's not something I've heard tweaks about. I think that so long as college tuition is increasing at or higher than the rate of inflation, that's unlikely to happen. Particularly as we see the whole student loan thing unfurling in unpleasant ways. What I would do is say the 529 isn't really the be all and end all. It can make sense to say for college outside of the 529, just in your regular investment accounts. And I suppose if you're really, if you've got very substantial means and you want there to be a pool of your money for college and beyond, you could think about establishing a trust for your kid. That's much less common than the 529. I think most folks are really concerned about the 529. And I think at this stage of the game, they are so popular that if there were a negative change going forward that managed to pass both houses of Congress without their constituents jumping up and down and screaming, that most existing 529 plans would be grandfathered from whatever that change was, and it would only apply going forward. That's the way negative tax legislation tends to happen.
Hey, Claire, there's another interesting question that someone has just submitted. You know, they say all these tax benefits are nice, but are there other benefits to having a 529 that involve, you know, discipline for families to reach their financial goals and stay on track?
Well, yeah, in any dedicated savings vehicle, whether it's a 529, an employer-sponsored retirement account, an IRA, or even, remember the old Christmas funds we all grew up with at the bank? Anything like that is great discipline. I'm a huge believer in auto payments, auto investing. If you set up a 529, you can also set up a regular monthly transfer from your checking account, from your investment account, whatever it is, to go in there, just as from every paycheck, you're making a regular contribution to your 401k. What isn't in your checking account doesn't get spent. So I'm a huge believer in figure out what you're comfortable contributing to a 529 plan over the course of the year and break it down either monthly or even to match every paycheck and have that go in automatically. When you set up the 529 plan, you're also going to choose the investments that are in the plan. So your contributions will be invested automatically. You're not going to have to go in every 2 weeks or every month and buy a mutual fund. And this is a way that automation can be your friend and really get you to a better investment result at the end of the day.
Claire, we have one last question for you, and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Okay.
But the question is, let's say a family out there has started perhaps with the New Jersey fund or some other state where the choices and expenses are inferior. Are they able to change it to another state's program?
Yes, you can. There are some restrictions around this, but certainly at least once a year, you can move a 529 from state to state. That's not a problem. What you typically would do is set up the second 529 plan in the destination state. And then the destination state plan would reach over to the original state and pull the assets over.
Great, thank you.
So
we've got a lot more questions, but we have promised our audience to hold this to about 40 minutes. First of all, I want to thank Claire for giving us a very informative discussion here and great overview. I also want to thank you for taking the time to listen to us. We also would like to extend an invitation. If any of you would benefit from a complimentary meeting where you could sit down with Claire and the others on the team and talk a little bit about, obviously, perhaps college savings, but more broadly, your financial goals and objectives, we'd be delighted to do that on a complimentary basis. You see our contact information on the screen. And finally, of course, we do hope to have these webinars on a monthly basis. If there are other topics you would like us to cover, please feel free to submit and we'll work on it and continue our quest to be as informative as possible for the community. So okay. With that, thank you very much.
No, one more thing. I just want to say that 67% of you think that it's your job to put your kids through college. I would venture to say that a large portion of the other 33% are the grandparents, not the parents. But certainly, most of us believe that this is part of what being a parent is getting a child through college, technical school, whatever it is, post high school. And I tell folks that if you've done that, you've done your job. Financially, it's what your kids can most expect from you. If you leave them anything at the end of the day, that's great, but it isn't required. So,
sound advice. Thank you again, Claire, and thank you all out there.